welcome to the first episode of The Architect, a very unique look at the 1995 World Series triumph of the Braves over the Cleveland Indians from the perspective of those who built the team, starting with John Schuerholz, longtime general manager, 55 years in professional baseball, 30 years with Atlanta, and of course, not too long ago, inducted into the National Baseball Hall of Fame. And we're going to be picking his brain for all 6 games of this World Series. John, welcome. It's great to see you.
Thanks, Jim. It's a delight to be here and happy to visit this special time in our history, the 1995 World Series Championship.
Having done a deep dive on this World Series here in the last couple of weeks, I'm telling you, I've learned an awful lot about it that I didn't know before, and I've picked your brain some too, so I know you're going to bring a lot of insights here. I want to ask you about the title, The Architect, because you're a humble guy. I mean, you've got all sorts of accolades and honors and awards over the years, and I always see you giving credit to other people. What do you think of the title, The Architect? Does that make you uneasy?
It makes me proud first, and a bit not uneasy, but I want to open my arms and include yet another significant person in the Braves organization. That's our skipper, Bobby Cox, who is unable to be with us at this time, but the partnership and the relationship and the working environment between the two of us that was created, and with his coaching staff and with our player development people and with our scouting staff, really allowed us to get the job done. There was not one time I can recall in the 17 years we worked together side by side that there was a harsh word between the two of us. We disagreed sometimes on the evaluation of players, but we resolved those amicably and professionally and moved forward and did our things. And as you look back on the history of the rosters we put together, the two of us together and other people involved as well, but Bobby and I principally, they worked, and we were able to compete for high watermarks in this industry and for championships over many years. So I want to be sure that the title that says Architect in your mind and the mind of the viewers has a little S at the end of that word, architects, including Bobby Cox and John Schuerholz.
That's very well stated. So when you're giving us stories and giving us insights into what the thinking was at the time and the strategy and all that, you're really speaking for you and Bobby, are you not?
I am, and I think I can, and I think he would have no objection. I know he would have no objection to it because that's how we work. We were almost in each other's minds when we would sit down with the staff and the coaching staff and make a decision about player moves or whatever, or roster evaluations or roster adjustments. And he and I were like on the same page.
Why did you come to Atlanta from Kansas City? I mean, you were in a pretty good spot there. It's a good organization. It had some success. What were you looking to accomplish by coming to Atlanta?
Well, Jim, that was a very difficult decision for me. My wife, Karen, is from Kansas City. Our family grew up there. I loved it there. What was happening in the ownership with the Royals, Mr. Kaufman, our principal owner, was facing some medical circumstances, and the organization was going to be restructured in a way. And I could have stayed if I chose to, but something felt not right with me staying there. And I just believed that moving on at that moment was the right thing in my career and right thing for me and my family. And it just so happened that at that time, the Atlanta Braves had decided to keep Bobby Cox in the dugout and had sent a message out to the industry. They were looking for a general manager. So I made contact with permission by the Royals, and we started talking, and eventually I was hired by the Braves in 1990 to be the executive vice president and general manager.
You know, we're talking about the early years of the 90s. Later, we're going to focus in, obviously, on our main subject matter for this 6-episode series, and that's the 95 World Series. But so much of the groundwork was built starting in 91, and I'm wondering if you could take us back to when you and Bobby, after you had accepted the job, and we all knew what the roles were going to be for everybody, and you guys sat down and started discussing philosophies and principles that the two of you wanted to put in place. Can you talk about that some?
Absolutely. The observations and the evaluations that I made personally when I did my deep dive into the organization was to determine what it was that we needed most to build a championship caliber team. This was a team with good young pitching on it already. We knew they were going to grow and mature, or I did. I believe they would. A farm system loaded with talent, bubbling towards the surface. not far from the major leagues, and a manager that was unparalleled in his ability to work with people and develop players and to put winning teams together, as I was able to do in Kansas City. And I believed we needed to add some veteran players quickly. We signed Terry Pendleton to be our third baseman, who became the MVP that first year. We signed Rafael Belliard as our shortstop. We signed Sid Bream as the first baseman. Later on in spring training, we made a deal with the Montreal Expos. We trained in the same complex with the Expos, and they had Otis Nixon, and they were willing to trade him, and we made a trade for him, and that really solidified the defense of our team. I did a lot of tape review of the Braves games the year prior, and there were a lot of great pitches made by good young pitchers that went through the wicket of the legs of a lot of the infielders, or thrown into the 12th row of the seating capacity of the seating bowl. And I said, well, we can fix that. We can get the players to fix that. But in so doing, getting those good defensive players, I also wanted to get leaders, winners, people who could lead and win and help young guys follow along with them. And we were able to do that with Bobby at the lead.
You know, with an overview look at the early years of the 90s, obviously 91 World Series, 92 World Series, didn't win either one. Can you take us through the way the team progressed step by step through the early 90s to get to where we are today with this series, The Architect, which is at the start of the 1995 World Series?
Well, fortunately, the first year, the moves we made, the decision we made that led us into the moves we made and the acquisitions and the re-strengthening of our roster with those players, those leadership players, those winning spirit players. We brought up young players. They were exposed to those guys. And year after year after year, our major league team got better. The young players who came forward up through our system were of higher caliber, more prepared to play, ready to help and to communicate and to commit and to contribute to the major league team. And they did that. And our team just played good baseball, no matter who we were facing. The good young players, the good veteran players meshed together well, I should say. And we won games, and we started to get the feeling that we can win. We can compete with whomever it is that's in the dugout across the field.
I've talked to quite a few members of that 95 World Championship team, and when you ask them for details of things they remember and moments in games that maybe I'm thinking about, and to a man, the word blur comes through, because there was so much success in the early 90s. And then 95, I sense from the post-mortem conversations with these players that they were desperate to win the World Series. They had to get that feather and stick it in the cap, and this was the time to do it.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, we had a lot of almost wins. We had talented enough players. The bounces didn't go our way. The breaks didn't go our way. And Bobby Cox always reminded me, he said, John, we have good players, but every once in a while you have to have the luck of the draw, or you have to have the luck of the bounce of the ball, more so in our sport. And we didn't have that, but we had good players, and we didn't give up, and we weren't faint of heart because we didn't win a World Championship in 91 or 92. We knew we had the caliber, we knew we had the players, we knew we had the program and the leadership, and we were confident that one of these days we were going to get to that pinnacle and succeed, and we did in 1995.
What's your iconic saying about winners and losers and excuses?
Winners make commitments, Jim, and losers make excuses. I've reminded so many people in our organizations all over the place of that. It now is written in our clubhouse, our new clubhouse in Northport, Florida. That statement: winners make commitments, losers make excuses, and that pretty much says it all. If you want to be a champion, live by those words.
Well, you mentioned you had all the players, the coaches, the staff, the support ready to go for 1995. It was a good intersection for the Braves as an organization. But you didn't quite have all the players. You still had a few acquisitions that were quite key over the course of the 95 season that showed up big in the World Series. Can you talk about guys like Luis Polonia? What attracted you to him? Mike Devereaux, Alejandro Pena you got on August 31st, and of course the big one back in April, Marquise Grissom, huge trade.
Yeah, Keith was a key. They were all valuable guys to us. Alejandro Pena really solidified our bullpen. He was not being used often with his former team, and we liked him a lot. We brought him in, and he solidified the back end of our bullpen. Mike Devereaux was a very, very capable outfielder, defensive player, good base runner, get some key hits. And Louis Bologna was the same thing. Left-handed hitter, little fellow, but he had some bat speed and he had some excitement to him. And of course, Marquise Grissom was a frontline outfielder that really solidified our team. And all of those guys together contributed. Our frontline guys did their job. Our pitching was remarkable, and we went on to play in a lot of postseason series.
What kind of a clubhouse do you feel like you had? It's one of those things that can't be quantified, but all winning baseball teams talk about what they had in the clubhouse. It's there's only a couple of teams like the Red Sox, 25 players, 25 cabs. But for the most part, if you're going to win big, you need a cohesive and strong clubhouse. What was your clubhouse like in '95?
The clubhouse environment is a byproduct of the players you decide to bring and add to your team. You know the players that have come up through your farm system. You know their character. You know their work ethic. You know their commitment. You know their winning spirit. It's those that you put your neck out on the line as a general manager and say, I want to acquire Terry Pendleton, even though many say that he's near the end of the road of his career. Some said that. I believed otherwise. And you have to put your neck out on the line and get to know that person's character. And I did. And I had a lot of scouts tell me about the value and the character and the professionalism of those players that we brought in. And all of those guys that I mentioned early on in this interview were guys of that caliber. There were winning spirits. They were committed players. They were professional. And they not only helped us win, but they demonstrated to the young guys putting on the Braves uniform for the first time, this is how you prepare yourself. This is how you compete. This is how you act when you win. This is how you act when you lose.
How would you characterize this matchup in the '95 World Series, the Braves and the Indians? Braves with all that pitching. The Indians certainly had a good pitching staff, but they were known for their big, booming bats. What were you thinking as the World Series was about to start?
It was as if the baseball gods had finally decided, you know what? We have a matchup that is ideal for us. We've got a team that is a bunch of bombers. They swing the bat, they get hits, they score runs, they mash people. And on the other side of the field, we have a team that has the best starting pitching staff in all of baseball. How will that match up? Who will win? The bombers, the hitters, or the pitchers? And as it turned out, it was a very close series, as we all know. Heart-pumping series, as we all know, but we prevailed because we had a very, very good balance of our team, as did the Indians, to be honest. They had some pitching that was quite good and under the radar guys, but they were under the radar until they took the mound against our hitters, and you saw what they had, and we all saw what they had, but we prevailed. And it was a determination and a winning spirit with the leadership of Bobby Cox and his great coaching staff that took us over the line, and we became world champions.
Last question before we get into game one itself. Obviously, the Indians lineup was ridiculous. I mean, but you had to pitch to somebody. So when you had a full week, since you swept the Reds, you had a full week to sit around and think about the Indians and break them down, study them, scout them. And did you prioritize how we're going to pitch to certain guys? We're not going to let this guy beat us. How did you figure out where the weaknesses and strengths were in that lineup?
Well, by the time we got to that off week where we could, sort of put our feet up on the table and relax and put our hands behind our head, not so. We were grinding. We were grinding, looking at their rosters, looking at their recent successes and failures, each player on each roster. And we knew what we had to do, but we also had an opportunity to play interleague play from time to time, and we saw some of those guys and we knew what they did, and we sent our advanced team of scouts scouting every game, every inning of every game, every pitch, every swing the bat. So we had a lot of real good data on those people, and we analyzed it and we utilized it, and it helped us do a very good job in competing against a very, very talented Cleveland Indians club that had some great hitters on their roster.
All right, I lied. One more question. You had that week off. A lot of people would argue, you hear in baseball all the time, even the All-Star break is too long. We come back, we feel like we haven't played baseball in a while. And here you are at the biggest moment in your life and in the life of those players. and you get a full week off. Now, it could be beneficial, as you just alluded to you and the front office and the scouting staff to help prepare the players better. But what about the players? Were you worried about them not playing baseball for 7 days and then going out there and starting the World Series?
There's a worry about that because this is a game where you have to refine your swing. You have to get your pitching motion down, and you can't take a week off again without competition. That's always concerning to anybody who runs a Major League Baseball team, manager or a general manager. That's always a concern. But our guys, as I said before, their character, their will to win, their determination, their commitment to their profession and to our team was so great, as was the manager Bobby Cox and our coaching staff. They went out there and they grinded through their practices every day. They didn't take it easy. They went after it, and it kept them sharp enough so that when the series began again, we were ready to compete.
Did you set the rotation for the entirety of the World Series or just the first few games?
First few games, because you don't know how, it's the end of the season, a lot of stress and strain on those bodies, especially the arms for pitchers. So you can't project out too far, and you have to have a game plan that will allow you, in case someone comes up short or has a short outing and has to one of your key guys, and you have to take him out so he's not abused physically, and then manage that game with the pitchers you have in the bullpen. And we had to do that a couple of times in that series.
Now, John, why in the world would you and Bobby go with Greg Maddux in Game 1?
Well, I think probably because we both felt, and as did the world at large, he was the very best pitcher in Major League Baseball that year. So wouldn't it be foolish for us not to take the very best pitcher in baseball and put him on the field for game number 1?
Flips the first one. He just makes it look so easy. Nobody does it better in the National League than Greg Maddux.
Yeah, as it turns out, it was a slam dunk, which was obvious to all of us. But what a luxury to be able to throw that guy out there. And he's up against Doral Hershiser, never lost a postseason game. Maybe not in his prime, but he's still throwing the ball very well, as is evidenced by his ALCS MVP award. Maddux just goes out there and throws a 2-hitter, no earned runs, 19 ground outs in the game. Mark Lemke had 8 assists. There were 2 fly balls to the outfield that were caught, a couple of infield pop-ups. I mean, he was as dominant as he could possibly have been in winning Game 1.
It was vintage Greg Maddux. That's how we watched him pitch almost every game he took them out.
There was one spot in the game where I felt like it was really important. It was 1-1 game, bottom of the 7th of Game 1. Braves had loaded up the bases. There's nobody out. Luis Polonia comes up as a pinch hitter, and he hits a ground ball out to Vizquel. Now, Vizquel, as you know far better than I, one of the greatest defensive shortstops in Major League Baseball in his prime.
Absolutely.
He gobbles up the ground ball and then tries to take it to second for a force of Devereaux, and he's fumbling the ball. I don't know if he was trying to hurry to think maybe he could get a double play on it or what, because you never see him fumble the ball. But he fumbled the ball popped out of his glove into the air, he stepped on the bag, and Bruce Fleming called Mike Devereaux out.
Grounded to short, and it's juggled by Vizquel. He gets it out there. Cox arguing the call with Fleming at second base. Bobby saying, look at the replay, but they're not going to replay this one.
I don't think Vizquel ever had control of the ball.
Everybody knows the call actually was missed. If there had been replay, I'm 100% sure it would have been overturned. But Bobby had his say, and finally Fleming told him he had to get off the field, so he turns and he starts heading back to the dugout. But he's still gesturing wildly and having his tantrum and yelling and all that. But while he's gesturing wildly and throwing his arms around, he's also signaling to third base coach Jimmy Williams, wasn't he?
He was, as he had done throughout the year. And Jimmy was always on his toes waiting for Bobby going off the field and maybe throwing his cap up in the air or his histrionics. And at the same time signaling to Jimmy what he wants to have happen on the next play. In this particular moment, we had a runner on third base. And the sign to Jimmy Williams was, I want Belliard to squeeze bunt and get this run in. And sure enough, that's what happened. And the Indians were probably astounded when that happened.
He bunts, the squeeze is on, he lays it down, they'll get a run. Perfect.
That run that Belliard drove in on the perfect squeeze against a really tough reliever in Tavares was the third run in a 3-2 Atlanta win. Obviously, it was huge. Rafi didn't have a hit in the World Series, but that was a great moment for him.
Hot foul, giving chases Jones, and he makes the catch to give the Braves the win.
John, Braves 3, Indians 2, up 1-0, and we're off to episode 2 or game 2 of the series. We're going to do it game by game, episode by episode, we're going to cover each and every game in this World Series and get your insights as we've done today. Thank you so much, John.
My pleasure.
And thank you out there for watching The Architect. I'm Jim Powell.